Welcome, everybody. Nice to have you here. We're going to dive right in. 7 o'clock is 7 o'clock. All right. Um, the shiur is about organ donation, and rabbis have always given their kishkas to their congregants, and parents give their heart and soul to their children. So it's not strange for us to delve into this, but we're going to talk about the actual practical halachic ramifications of giving of your organs. There are two avenues we have to look at. The one is live donations. That means a person who donates part of his body while he's still alive. And then there's also after death autopsy or post-mortem, not autopsy, post-mortem donations, whether that's allowed in halakha, if the body is allowed to be cut up, sorry for use of a better word, and those organs given to help other people save lives, etc. So those are the two avenues that we're going to explore tonight from a halachic, from a Torah perspective. Um, Obviously, the greatest chesed that you can do is giving of your money. But there's even a greater chesed, giving of your time. And there's even a greater chesed, a greater kindness, and that is giving of your actual limbs to somebody. So if giving of your money is considered a great chesed, a great kindness, and giving your time is even greater, then obviously if you actually give from your physical body, there can't be anything greater than that as far as chesed, as far as the basic understanding of human kindness, of giving can be understood. So let's talk about blood, giving your blood. So yeah, it's a big mitzvah, and if a person has the opportunity and there's nothing wrong with them to go and be a blood donor is a big mitzvah. It's a very high level of chesed. So people that can manage to do that and don't have problems with it, that would be a big mitzvah to do. What about bone marrow? So bone marrow donations is actually a big risk for the donor because in some situations, I think in all situations, the person needs a general anesthetic. And let's just discuss general anesthetic in halakha is a danger to the person who's undergoing that procedure because someone who has had a general anesthetic, when he comes back to shul, within 30 days, he has to thank Hashem with a special blessing of thanksgiving for keeping him alive. So basically, his life was in danger, and that much is not expected from a person. So you're not obligated to give your bone marrow because of the process, because of the procedure that is involved. Halachically, you are not obligated to do it. You can give if you want, but you're not obligated to give. Blood, on the other hand, there could even be an obligation. If there is someone who needs blood and you have the right type, then there could even be an obligation. It would be similar to someone knocking on your door and asking for food. You have an obligation to give them food. You'd have an obligation to give them of your blood. But your bone marrow, you don't have an obligation according to the Torah because you are putting your life at risk. What about donating a kidney? So I saw if you can say, a cute idea on this, and that is that a person can function very well in his whole life, in fact, with one kidney. So why did Hashem give him two kidneys? Everything else in our body, we've got one heart. We don't have two hearts. You got one liver, you got one spleen, one pancreas, two lungs. Okay, I guess you need both. Two eyes, you need that for, we'll see later on, for 3D vision, for depth perception. Two ears, one nose. So why did Hashem give you two kidneys? So I saw a vote and said one of them is given to you so that you can donate it to someone in need. And yes, maybe in the past it was a big risk, but today It's not such a risk. And by the way, all the information I'm giving you is a shiur I heard by Rabbi Dr. Akiva Tatz. I have no medical knowledge at all, and I don't even want to pretend that I do. It's really me plagiarizing or regurgitating what I heard from him, and I'm going to stick to his medical and superior Torah knowledge. So I'm not making up any of the stuff. This all comes from him, and therefore, if you have any problems with what I'm saying, please don't contact me. Please contact Rabbi Tatz. All right. So when it comes to kidneys, in fact, what they found was that kidney donors live longer than people who don't donate their kidneys. And the reason for this is, well, number one, obviously Hashem loves them because they are full of chesed. But also on a more practical basis, it's because they're always going for checkups. Because now that they've got one kidney, they've got to go for medical checkups. And if something else comes up, the doctor will pick up on it early and he can nip it in the bud. And therefore, kidney donors on average live longer than people who keep both kidneys. Now, donation of a lung while you're still alive is not a good idea, and you don't have to do that because you are endangering yourself. You don't need to endanger yourself. I guess it would be the same with giving money. If it's going to impoverish you, you don't have to give money. So if it's going to endanger you by giving an organ while you are still alive, it will endanger you. You are not obligated to do that. Liver donations are also very dangerous, and therefore you do not halachically have to donate a portion of your liver to help someone else who needs it. So there we've covered blood, bone marrow, kidney, liver, and lung. So where do rabbis get their information from? Because this concept is not in the Torah, or is it in the Torah? So what we do is, as I've explained to you in the past, we look back at our sources. We look at the Torah, we look at the prophets, we look at the writings. There's nothing there about this. So then we move to the Gemara. There's nothing in the Gemara about it. So who was the first rabbi that actually spoke about it? The answer is it was in the 1200s by a great rabbi called the Radbaz. Radbaz is the acronym of his name, Rav David ben Zemra, and he lived in an Arab country. I think it was in Egypt actually, and he wrote a shut. A shut is a responsa, a shalois utshuvos, which is questions and answers that were sent to him, and he compiled all the questions that were asked to him, and he developed his books on it. This is not uncommon. Every rabbi worth his salt has put together his own compendium of halachot. The most famous perhaps is the Igros Moshe. I'm looking now at a set that I have of 8 volumes, and every page is another question and a letter that he received. Rabbi Moshe Feinstein died in 1985, 1986, and all of the questions that were asked to him are in there, and he dealt with every question. For example, "Hi Rabbi, when is Rosh Hashanah this year?" all the way to, "Hi Rabbi, we need to divide what they called not Siamese twins, conjoined twins. How do we divide conjoined twins?" So from the most banal question all the way to the most complicated halachic questions, Rav Moshe Feinstein was asked. He recorded all of his questions, and his genius is seen in the answers that he provided. So the Radbaz, this 13th century rabbi, also put together a book, and this is the question. Are you ready? There was a Jew who stole money in Turkey, and he was sentenced to have his arm cut off, to have his hand chopped off, as it was, I think, even in some Middle Eastern countries still today, that is the punishment for theft. And so this guy was sentenced to have his arm cut off, but before they could catch him, he ran away and he escaped to Egypt. So he did the crime, if he did or didn't, allegedly did the crime in Turkey, and then he ran away and he was hiding in Egypt. So the Sultan of Turkey was very upset about this and needed to get this Jew back. So what did he do? He went to the ghetto of the Jewish people and he kidnapped a Jew and held him in ransom and said to this guy, I don't know how he got the message to him, through messenger, letters, whatever was around in those days, and said, if you don't come back to Turkey to get your arm cut off, I will put this Jew, this innocent Jew, to death. So he held this innocent Jew as at ransom, and he was waiting for this guy to come back to Turkey. So this Jew didn't know what to do. Do I go back to Turkey and get my arm cut off? Or can I carry on hiding in Egypt, knowing full well that an innocent Jew will be put to death? Quite a dilemma. So I don't know how you would paskin if you were the rabbi that was asked this question. I think most of us would say, oh, you'll have to give yourself up. Sorry, buddy, you can't do that to another Jew. But listen to this mind-blowing answer of the Radbaz. The Radbaz said, yes, it would be chesed, it would be a tremendous amount of kindness to get your arm cut off to save the life of another Jew, just like it would be tremendous chesed to give one of your lungs to someone who was dying, whose life was in danger. But you don't have to put your life in danger to save a life. You don't have to give your lung to save the life of someone who's dying. And you don't have to get your arm cut off to save the life of another Jew, as we say. Mind blowing. Who would have thought that that was the answer? And that is the answer the Radbaz gives to this gentleman. I don't know what happened. I don't know if he went back to Turkey or if he stayed nice and comfortably in Egypt. And I don't know if the other Jew, the innocent Jew, was killed or not. But how's that? How is that answer? You don't have to give up your life to save another Jew. Wow. I guess that would be the same if someone is drowning in a riptide. You don't have to jump into the water to save them, even if you know how to swim, because chances are you will have to give up your life, and you are not obligated to give up your life. You only have to do it if there's very low risk. And really, the only thing that you'd have to donate is blood and kidneys. Those are low risk. Everything else that we've discussed is a lot. There is a lot of risk. And what's interesting over here is that having an arm chopped off is life-threatening. I imagine they never sterilized the sword, so obviously it would be prone to infection and things like that. But I must just tell you a story. When I was a young rabbi in Santon Shul in Joburg, a young girl was playing on the jungle gym on Shabbos, and she fell off the jungle gym and landed on her arm and broke her arm. And the kids came running to me and they were like, Rabbi, Rabbi, she broke her arm. Or they weren't really sure, but she was screaming in pain. And me being a young rabbi, just fresh out of yeshiva, I wasn't sure if you were allowed to call an ambulance or not. Is it life-threatening, not life-threatening? But thank God they didn't wait for my answer, because I was so inexperienced as a young rabbi of 23 years old. They went and they ran to the senior rabbi of the shul, which was Rabbi Sushard, and they asked him, and without even a hesitation, Rabbi Sushard said, phone the ambulance. That Santon Shul's right near Morningside Clinic. In fact, he was going to drive her himself to the hospital and break Shabbos to help this little girl who broke her arm, because apparently breaking an arm or a leg is life-threatening. It is life-threatening. It is pikuach nefesh. And therefore, there's no doubt about it. You break Shabbos for a broken arm or a broken leg. And definitely if the guy's arm is going to get chopped off by the government, by the Sultan, so that's definitely life-threatening, and a person wouldn't have to give up their life to save someone else in such a situation. And the only caveat to all of this is that it has to be done with a person's full consent. When we come to the donation of blood, you can't forcibly take a person's kidney or blood. You need a person's consent. And unduly, what's it called, coercion is not allowed. So in a situation where there's coercion even from family members, that's also not allowed. You're not allowed to coerce someone to donate their blood or their kidney or even their money. But you can do it in a clever way. In fact, there's an organization in New York, a board in New York City, where if someone in the family needs to donate a kidney, or someone needs the donation of a kidney, the whole family goes, and they keep it secret, who is a donor and who isn't. And they let that individual know. They don't tell the rest of the family who is a matching donor, so that no one has to lie and no one has to feel guilty if they don't want to donate their kidney, because it has to be done with full consent. And if a person doesn't want to give it, and then they are in the situation where everybody else in the family is going to look at them askance, so they can be protected by this confidentiality. The question now arises, though, are you allowed to accept financial compensation for doing that? So yes, you're not expected to give it for free, and you're definitely not expected to pay for all the medical bills and all that. That's definitely has to be covered. And what about loss of work? You're going to be out of work now. You donated a kidney, so you're lying in hospital for 6 weeks yourself. And what about all that salary that you missed out on? You are definitely allowed to take money for that. And it doesn't take away from the chesed, it doesn't take away from the kindness that you have done by accepting a financial compensation in that instance. So that's what Rabbi Tatz explains, and that's how Rabbi Tatz explains it. And by the way, Rabbi Osher Weiss, who's probably the greatest halachic decider, posek in Hebrew, the greatest halachic posek alive today, he says that statistically, the religious community is the highest donors of kidneys in the world, but they are the lowest donors post-mortem. So that now segues us nicely into post-mortem donations. So we've covered while you are alive, kidneys, great idea if you have the wherewithal to do it, the stomach to do it. You don't blood, good, big mitzvah. You don't have to give your bone marrow. You don't have to give your liver. You don't have to give your lung. I think that covers all live donations. But now we enter into the murky waters of post-mortem donations. So let's first analyze what would be the problem with taking the organs from someone who is dead. So do you need consent from the dead? Halachically, I'm not talking legally, I'm talking halachically. Do you need consent? No. If someone dies and you take his car, are you a ganef? Are you a thief? So you never stole from the dead, because a person who dies doesn't own anything anymore by definition. You take nothing into the grave, it says in Psalms. Ki loi b'moiso yikach hakol. You don't even take your honor with you. You take nothing. That's why shrouds, tachrichim, in Judaism doesn't have pockets, because you can't take anything into the next world with you. You can't even take your car with you. The Egyptians were buried with all their gold, but we aren't buried with anything. In fact, you're not even meant to have a box, halachically, but according to the law of the country, specifically South Africa, you are meant to be buried in a box, a pine box. So how do we get around that problem when you have the law of the land versus the halachic law? I don't know if anyone's ever been to a funeral in Israel. I was quite shocked to see the bodies on a stretcher wrapped in a tallis or in shrouds, and you can actually see the form of the body being moved around from the ambulance or whatever, the hearse. They don't use a hearse, they use an ambulance, and you can just see the body, the shape of the body. It was so weird. They don't use coffins because halachically you're not allowed to. So how do we get around that problem? They drill holes in the bottom of the coffin so that the body is as close to the ground as possible. So there you have achieved the legality of the South African government by putting them in a pine box, and also the halachic implication that there are holes in the bottom so that the body decomposes at the right speed. You see, the neshama, the soul, needs to come to terms with its demise, with the death of its body. I don't know if you've ever experienced this, but have you ever had like your cell phone stolen or your watch, and then you see it? You see someone with the same watch. You have such a close connection to it. Or you had a car that was stolen, and then a few months later you see the car that you used to drive, a same model, and you feel the connection to your physical things. So when a person passes away, that connection to your body is so strong. You're fully aware, because the neshama is your awareness, your consciousness is fully aware of the body, and it takes time to get over the fact that you aren't part of your body anymore. So, how much time does a neshama need to get over itself? So, cremation is too quick. The trauma, the sudden loss of body is too much, and even a coffin is too quick for a coffin is too long for the body, for the neshama to come to terms with its demise, with its loss. So the perfect way the rabbis understood through Kabbalah was to put the body in shrouds and then in the ground, and that gives the neshama just enough time to come to terms with it. And that's why you definitely can't put the person in a lead coffin or in a mausoleum where he's going to, or embalm him, where he's going to exist for another 100 years. It's just too long, too much trauma. And cremation is too quick, too sudden, the trauma. So they measured that the exact amount of time was tachrichim, shrouds in the ground, and that was enough time. But nevertheless, I digress. The body doesn't own anything. Yes, the Yorishim, the inheritors, the children, the family, they inherit. So stealing the car might be theft from the Yorishim, but you're not actually stealing from the body. So if you dig into the guy that's passed away and you take out his corneas and his liver and his whatever you take, his heart, which we'll discuss in more detail, you're not actually stealing. So what problems exist post-mortem? So problem number one is called nivul hames. Nivul hamet is the desecration of a dead body. We are so strict with this that there are some people who get paid to watch a body. In the olden days, this was very important because we didn't want the body to be attacked by mice and other insects before burial. So they used to have something called wachters, watchers. Today, with our refrigeration system and all that, you don't need to have it, but there are people I know in Joburg, I don't know in Cape Town, but there are people in Joburg who can be paid, undertakers who can be paid to watch the body. And what do? They sit all night saying Tehillim. They're not allowed to talk to each other. They're not allowed to sit on their cell phone. Even that is a desecration of the dead. Even wearing your tzitzit out is a desecration of the dead. So definitely cutting into the person to remove an organ post-mortem is definitely a desecration from the dead. So therefore that would not be allowed. That would be problem number one, would be desecration. Problem number two is you're not allowed to get any benefit from the dead. So you're not allowed to plant flowers in a grave because you are getting benefit from the person who's in the ground. That's why at Judaism, we don't put flowers on the grave, even though flowers are dead already. But pot plants, for example, you must leave them in the pot. Don't plant them in the actual grave bed. But we put rocks on a grave because a rock is the most eternal thing you have. It will be around for a couple million years till the sun becomes supernova and engulfs the earth. Then those rocks will disappear. But that's, I think, 15 million years' time. So the rock will last the longest. Flowers just die after a few days, so there's no point. And we're trying to remember that the neshama, that the consciousness of the person, the memories of the person lives on forever. So the only thing we really have that can last for a very long time is a rock. So we put a rock on the grave to show that we visited and also to show our belief in the eternity of the soul. A flower is not a good idea, and therefore Jews don't bring flowers to a grave. But nevertheless, you're not allowed to plant anything in the grave because you're not allowed any benefit from the dead. But listen to this, you're not even allowed to walk over a grave. And that's not because of the impurity. Some people think, oh, you're not allowed to walk over a grave because the impurity shoots right up and it'll go into you. Well, once you're in the oil, when you're in the oil with the body and you're moving the body, you're already exposed to that spiritual radiation. So that makes no difference. The reason you're not allowed to walk over a grave is because you are benefiting 3 extra steps from when you would have walked around a grave. You see, walking around a grave takes 1, 2, 3 extra steps, and walking over a grave is 1 step. So you've just saved yourself 2 steps And that amount of benefit you're not allowed to get from the dead. So how much more so taking the guy's cornea or heart, you are benefiting from the dead. So number one problem was desecration. Number two is benefit. You're not allowed to have benefit. Number three is the body has to be, oh, sorry, one, just let me go back. You're not even allowed to lean on a tombstone. You know, you go to the cemetery and the rabbi's going on, and he's waffling about the guy and how amazing the person was, and you're getting a bit bored and you're getting a bit, you know, your legs are tired, so you want to put your arm on a tombstone. You're not even allowed to do that. And, you know, me in the tombstone business, often I get a phone call saying, hi, the tombstone, the headstone is loose. Why is it loose? Because some schmo leaned on it during his funeral and now it's wobbly. Not a good idea. And you're not allowed to do it. But then they go, no, 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 it wasn't put up properly. That's why it's loose. And then I have to pay for it because some guy never knew this halacha. But no enjoyment, no benefit is allowed from the dead. Also, number three, the body has to be buried intact with all its parts. In fact, even someone who had an amputation, so you, in that situation, you get a piece of land. The cemetery are very happy to sell you a reserved grave. It's about 8,000 Rand in Joburg. You reserve the plot, and then the amputated pieces are put in there. And then when the person dies, he reunites with the rest of his body. Shame, in my last shul that I worked at, there was a guy that had his leg amputated, and every Shabbos, you know, he'd come to shul in a wheelchair, and you'd say to him, "How are you doing?" And you'd say, "Ah, you know, I've already got one foot in the grave." Shame, but he could laugh about it, the guy. But even that, we reserve a grave, and then the amputated limbs are put into that. But consent, you don't need consent. So, how do we remove these three problems? Again, problem number one is desecration. Problem number two is benefit. Problem number three is it needs to be intact. So, the answer is if a body part can save the life of another person, that's called pikuach nefesh. And for pikuach nefesh, you can break the entire Torah except for three sins: adultery, idolatry, and murder. But for everything else, you can break the Torah. You can break these three prohibitions if you're going to save a life. But very important, there needs to be a life that's going to be saved. So if a person's kidney could save the life of another person after he's dead, then you would take that person's kidney to save a life, even though you're desecrating, and even though you're getting enjoyment, benefit from the dead. The mitzvah of saving a life trumps the avera, the sin of desecrating the dead. If you have someone in front of you, and in front of you doesn't, in Hebrew it's called choleh lefanenu. It doesn't mean someone right in front of you on the you know, in your house. It means even on another continent. If there's someone who needs that organ and it can be moved quickly by helicopter or whatever, and that person's life can be saved, that is called choleh lefanenu. However, if there's no life that's going to be saved, but the person wants to donate his body to medical science, so there you're not saving a life. Yes, maybe in 7 years' time, a doctor will come out of that who will perhaps save a life in the future. That's too far-fetched. That's not called choleh lefanenu. You actually need someone who needs that organ right now, not for research purposes, but will need that organ somewhere in front of us, somewhere on the planet, and that organ can help. Then you override these three problems of desecration, benefit, and the body has to be intact. And that would be allowed. The only time this comes up as a problem is heart donations, heart transplants, because remember I said to you, you're allowed to break the Torah, you're allowed to break these three laws for any sin in the Torah except for three: adultery, idolatry, and murder. And now the problem arises that if you take a beating heart out of a person who is in a coma, who is brain dead, are you committing murder to save a life? So that's the one of the three exceptions that you're not allowed to do. You're not allowed to commit murder to save the life of another person. But now the problem exists is removal of a heart murder or not? So until 1968, that's very recent. Until 1968, the whole world agreed that removal of a heart is tantamount to murdering the person. What happened in 1968? Chris Barnard invented the concept that brainstem death is death, not heart stoppage. Interesting, 1968. And only by 1980 did a Harvard committee decide that he was right, that brainstem death, coma, is considered death. So for thousands of years, the world agreed that heart stoppage was the definition of death. But just recently, the medical world agreed that no, heart stoppage is not death, but brainstem injury is death. And then we all know the story. Was he right and was he wrong? I'm not the judge, but it is interesting that he did pass away, Chris Barnard, a few years ago, and he died of a heart attack. I mean, that's a bit ironic. I mean, he could have, of all the other ways Hashem could have taken him, that was the one Hashem chose. That's very weird. But anyway, the question is, we're not really worried about the medical aspect. We're worried about the halachic aspect. Are you allowed to donate? Are you allowed to take the beating heart out of a person? You see, a heart is different from other organs. The heart has to be beating. Otherwise, once it's dead, then you can't revive the heart. So the kidneys and all those can be taken after the person is halachically and medically dead. But a heart starts getting into this gray area. So I must tell you, halachically, it's actually a machloket. It's actually an argument. And isn't that a surprise? In Judaism, there are different rabbis who hold different things. According to the London Beth Din, you are not allowed to take a heart from a beating heart, even from a person who's in a coma, whose brainstem has brainstem death, because that is murder. But according to the Rabbanut of Israel, the Rabbanut HaRashit, the chief rabbinate of Israel, you are allowed to take a heart. Or is it the other way around? I'm never sure. But with rabbis, whatever you do, you are wrong. So I must just tell you, if you are interested in donating all your other organs, there is a very interesting website called HODS.org. HODS stands for Halachic Organ Donation. I don't know what the S stands for. .org, and there you can pay a monthly fee. I don't know why you would, but you get a cool card, and it basically says that if you found they can use your organs to save a life, and they will do everything they can within halacha to ensure that the least amount of desecration to the body has been done. But then at the back of the card, there's a box to tick which rabbi you hold like regarding your heart. Do you hold like the rabbis who say you can, or do you hold like the rabbis who say you can't? And you can tick that box, and they'll either remove your heart or won't remove your heart. So I think that's fascinating. A Jew who wants to do it, it's a big mitzvah. Not often in life can you do a mitzvah after you've passed away, but here we go. If your organs will save the life of another person, they can desecrate the body in such a way, hopefully the smallest incision possible, but they can take organs from the person and use that to save a life. And a person is doing a mitzvah after they have died even. So definitely a kidney and lungs and all that would save a life. How's this? What about a cornea? What about a cornea from a person? Would you be allowed to take the cornea of a dead person? Is that life-saving? Is a cornea considered saving the life of someone who has passed, someone who is in need of a cornea. So definitely a blind person who gets a cornea transplant is is going to help them, because a blind person is more in danger of dying than a person who's sighted. And in fact, someone with binocular vision is safer than someone with only monocular vision. So even that, says Rabbi Tatz, having binocular vision is also considered pikuach nefesh. Having the ability to see depth perception can also save a person's life. I guess it makes sense. You know, you see the hole in the ground, and you can't judge where it is. A person could fall into that and can be a danger to his life. Therefore, having a cornea from a dead person is tantamount to pikuach nefesh, and therefore would be allowed to be taken from a body, even though you are breaking these three rules of desecration, benefiting from the dead, and the body has to be intact. But getting a cornea would help that person. Another interesting thing, what about a kohen? Is a kohen allowed to get parts of a dead body? Because a kohen is not allowed to come into contact with the dead. But what is the dead that he's not allowed to come into contact with? So the rabbis have a measurement for this as well. Get ready. A kohen is not even allowed to come into contact with the bone of a dead person, the size of a barley kernel. That's tiny. In my previous shul, no, previous to previous shul, I was a rabbi of awesome couples, and some of my members were dating, and the girl was a doctor. She used to work at the Gen, and the boy, that's a hospital in Joburg. Don't go there. Rather come to Cape Town and use those hospitals. But anyway, she worked at the Gen, and while she was studying medicine, she would often come home and bring body parts with her to her room. The problem was she was dating a Kohen. So the Kohen wasn't allowed to go into her room. It reminds me of my granny. She wouldn't let me bring girls into the room either. She said, it's not shnias. And I'm learning Le'ilu Nishmasa. It was Yotzat, yes, last night and today. So please God, learning the Torah that we learn today will be for her elevation of her soul. But my granny would say, it's not shnias to bring a girl into the room. But this guy had another problem. He was a Kohen, and she used to have body parts. And even having a finger bone of a dead person, a Kohen's not allowed, because a finger bone is already metatarsal. Is that what they're called? See, I told you I've no medical knowledge. I'm just a rabbi. But even that's much bigger than a barley. That's much bigger than a barley kernel. So he could never surprise her. She would have to clear the house of all the bones and everything she brought from the hospital before he was allowed to come into the house. So what happens? By the way, they're married with 3 beautiful kids, and they live in Israel now. So it obviously worked. But you got to get rid of the bones before the Kohen is allowed into the room. But can a Kohen have a dead man's eyeball, or cornea, or heart, or lung? Or so interesting. As soon as they connect the Kohen up to the new heart or the new lung, it springs to life, says one rabbi. And therefore, on the one hand, it's not a dead organ, it's actually helping the person. Another explanation is, yes, Kohen's not allowed to come into contact with the dead, but if it's going to save his life, remember, pikuach nefesh, you're allowed to break all the other laws in the Torah except for 3. So, yes, you're breaking the law of a Kohen coming into contact with the dead. That's one sin, but that sin is trumped by pikuach nefesh. Saving his life is greater, and therefore that wouldn't be a problem. And often I see no one's asked the question tonight. Sometimes they ask it to me. What about a pig's heart, the aorta of a pig? So that's a great shiur. That's a shiur about gelatine. Because I must tell you that the only non-kosher part of a pig is its basar. The Torah is very clear. The Torah says you're not allowed to eat mibasaram lo tochelu. You're not allowed to eat its meat. But the rest of the pig is not kosher. If you ate your pigskin jacket, that's fine. If you ate or have a pig's heart inside you, that's fine. The pig's heart and bones and jacket and skin and hair are not treif. Only the basar of the pig is treif, and that enters into gelatine because gelatine doesn't come from the basar of a pig, it comes from the bones of a pig. So I don't want to confuse you and say that it's kosher because your Beth Din won't like that, but it actually is. But don't quote me because I don't want to lose my rabbinic smicha, my ordination. But really, having the aorta of a pig or the heart of a pig or whatever is absolutely halachically fine inside a human body. Even if you are the most religious of religious, there's no problem whatsoever having an animal part inside a human at all. That would be allowed. So the reason I gave the shiur, I know it's a bit morbid and macabre and all that, but we had a very interesting discussion on Shabbat from Billy talking about end of life decisions. And I didn't really want to get into it because it's already taken 41 minutes and everyone was interested to get home. So I decided to give the shiur now and discuss these things. So as I said to you, those are the interesting applications. And what I love is that Torah, in one way or another, deals with all this stuff. There's always answers to all the questions. You just got to find the right rabbi who knows and has the right amount of knowledge. And what also fascinates me is that nothing is sucked out of anyone's thumb. In Torah, we always look for previous sources. We always go back to previous sources in order to corroborate what we are saying and try and link it to halachic principles that we already know. So yeah, as weird as that shiur was, I hope you learned something. I wouldn't say I hope you enjoyed it, but I hope you learned something from it. And we will post the recording if you, for whatever reason, you want to listen to it again, if you want to. But if you have any questions or any comments or any issues with the shiur, as I said to you before, please speak to Rabbi Dr. Tatz. And just cut me out. Don't even ask me. I'm just kidding. All right. Have a good night, everybody. Shkach for learning some Torah with us. And it was lovely. So many of you joined. Lovely to have you with us. Shkach.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jen.
Ruth, thank you.
Thanks, Ruth.